My name is Christy. 6 months ago, I sold an estate that had once been a source of so much pain and humiliation. Now, I'm the proud owner of my own event planning firm, building a life based on fair contracts, not the chains of guilt. But it all started on that fateful night at the Aspen Mountain estate. The police had just shown up, 2 squad cars lighting up the dark, snowy scene. My so-called father, Henry, was standing there with a fake, sorrowful smile, reporting me for felony theft. He claimed I'd stolen jewelry and heirlooms, playing the part of the grieving father to perfection. He even offered me a deal: return, finish the dinner, and he wouldn't press charges. It was a choice between jail and servitude. I calmly told the officers to search my truck. Inside, they found only the food and linens I'd legally bought with my own money. I showed them the receipts, and the false theft claim vanished, but the false report still stood. Then, I handed over the trust deed. The house was mine. Henry's life estate had a clause that hosting an engagement for a romantic partner would terminate his rights immediately, and that's exactly what he'd done. For the first time, he was looking at me not as his daughter, but as his landlord. I asked the police to remove him for trespassing, and they gave him 20 minutes to pack. As I watched him scurry around in the cold, I let my mind drift back to how I'd gotten here. I'm a successful event planner in Denver, handling multi-million-dollar budgets and the egos of high-profile clients. But when I arrived at the Aspen estate for my half-sister Isabella's engagement party, all my achievements evaporated. The wind was howling at 15 degrees below zero as Henry blocked the main entrance. He thrust a tattered plastic bag at me. Inside was a shabby polyester catering uniform and a dirty apron. "Isabella's family is in there," he said, not even bothering to look me in the eye. "They're high-class people. We can't have your loser single girl vibes ruining the look at the main table. Use the service entrance. And Christy, the steaks need to be medium rare. Don't embarrass me." I stood there, holding that cheap apron, knowing all the money I'd spent on the party was sitting in his fridge. I walked through the service entrance, and the heavy door slammed shut behind me, sealing out the cold and whatever dignity I had left. The kitchen was huge, shiny with stainless steel and marble, but it was also a cold, empty reminder of my mother who'd bought this estate 5 years before she died. Now it was just Henry's stage. I began unpacking the food I'd bought: Wagyu steaks, white truffle oil, and rare Bordeaux wine, charging $9,000 to my personal card because Henry said his money was tied up in Isabella's engagement ring. As I was arranging the hors d'oeuvres, Aunt Beatrice marched in. Without a hello, she scanned the counter for flaws. "You're late starting the prep," she snapped. "Isabella's parents are already criticizing the decor. We need this to go smoothly, Christy. Your father is under a lot of stress." "I paid for the steak, Beatrice," I retorted, slamming my knife on the cutting board. "And he raised you alone," she shot back, using her favorite excuse. "He sacrificed everything for you after your mother passed. The least you can do is make him happy today. Don't be so selfish." Selfish? The word hung in the air, heavy with irony. For years, I'd asked myself why I kept showing up, writing the checks, and tolerating their disrespect. I used to think it was because I was kind. But as I stood there slicing oranges for a party I wasn't allowed to attend, I finally understood. It was a psychological trap called normalized cruelty. In this family, affection was a currency, and I'd learned to pay for it with my labor and money. Henry hadn't raised a daughter. He'd trained a servant. Beatrice watched me, waiting for me to apologize. Instead, I put on the polyester apron, tying the strings tightly. A cold, mechanical feeling settled in my chest, like a lock clicking shut. If they wanted me to be the help, I would be. But they forgot that professionals expect to be paid. If the client breaks the contract, the professional has the right to walk away. "I'll have the appetizers out in 10 minutes, I said flatly. Beatrice nodded, satisfied that she'd put me in my place. Little did she know I was about to audit the account. The guests arrived in a fleet of luxury cars, stepping out in fur stoles and designer shoes. They were Isabella's people, old money and new, who didn't even acknowledge the staff. I circulated through the foyer with a tray of champagne, keeping my head down. It was a skill I'd perfected over the years. I watched Henry hold court by the fireplace, acting like the generous patriarch. He was telling a story about how he'd sourced the Bordeaux wine I'd driven 6 hours to find. I had it flown in, he lied, his voice full of false modesty. Nothing but the best for Isabella. You know me, I don't cut corners. I gripped the tray so hard my knuckles turned white. He wasn't just taking credit for the wine. He was taking credit for my taste, my effort, and my money. Then Isabella came over. She was elegant in a silk dress, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Henry, darling, I thought you said your daughter was coming. I was hoping to meet her. The room went quiet. I froze near the curtains. This was the moment he'd acknowledge me. Henry let out a short, dismissive laugh and pointed at me with his glass, not inviting me over but treating me like a piece of furniture. Oh, that's her. She's helping out today. Poor thing is having a hard time with her little event, planning business in the city. I told her she could work off some debt by doing the catering. We try to help family, right? The guests chuckled politely, and Isabella's expression changed from curiosity to mild disgust. Oh, that's very kind of you, Henry. I stood there, paralyzed in my black uniform. He hadn't just insulted me, he'd erased me. He'd taken my successful career and turned me into a charity case, using my exploitation to look good in front of his new friends. I didn't drop the tray or scream. I just walked back into the kitchen. The humiliation had turned cold and final. I was staring at the wall in the kitchen when Henry stormed in. His kind, patriarch act was gone. His face was red, and his eyes were narrowed. Pick up the pace, Christy, he hissed. People are waiting for the second course. Stop sulking in the corner. It's unprofessional. He didn't notice me shaking. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled envelope, slapping it on the counter. Take care of this. The propane company called. The tank is at 10%. They need payment before they'll send the emergency truck tonight. It's going to be 25 below zero. Isabella likes it warm. I looked at the bill. Another $1,500 for the emergency refill. You want me to pay for the heat? I asked, barely able to speak. Consider it your contribution, he said, turning to leave. Since you're not bringing a gift. That was the last straw. Something inside me snapped. The guilt and the hope that had bound me to him for so long just dissolved. I picked up my phone and called the gas company. This is the resident at 2300 Mountain View. I'm canceling the emergency delivery. We won't need it. Then I grabbed a marker and a piece of cardstock. I wrote in bold letters. Invoice, catering services $9,000, logistics and labor $2,800, past due balance $4,200. Total due upon receipt, $16,000. I taped it to the fridge door and added, services suspended for non-payment. I took off the apron, folded it neatly, and walked out into the blizzard. The cold hit me, but I didn't flinch. I climbed into my truck and started loading the food and supplies I'd bought. The wine, the steaks, the truffles. It took 15 minutes, and when I was done, the kitchen was empty. As I drove away, the snow was blinding, but I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. By canceling the propane delivery, I'd left the estate with only a couple of hours of heat before it turned into an icebox. It wasn't cruelty, it was just business. I checked into a cheap motel, blocked Henry's number, and finally felt free. And that's how I took back control of my life, leaving behind the cycle of abuse and starting anew.